everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks to all our new subscribers. We've gotten a good few the last while. If you haven't yet, please click subscribe. I haven't been around for the last while, and if you follow me on any of my social media platforms or on the Crippled Baby blog, then you will know that not only was I pregnant and just had my little sweet baby a couple of weeks ago, said baby in the background, that I've also unfortunately had coronavirus. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. So as I always say, these videos aren't from a medical perspective. I am not a doctor. This is my own experience of my conditions and my illnesses, and everyone's going to be different. One moment. So obviously, as a new mother, this is going to be very hard to record, so it's all going to be blotchy and in segments. So as I was saying, I'm going to be talking about my experiences of being pregnant and having Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, as well as my other conditions, then developing coronavirus. So if you are interested in that, please stick around. I know that some of these videos can be a bit cheesy because it's like a lot of YouTubers are just doing coronavirus videos just for the sake of it and clickbaity things, and luckily enough, like YouTube, in fairness to them, are closing them down quickly. So I hope this doesn't get deleted, because this is, like, as I said, my own experience. So as I always say, like, Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is a complex condition, and so are the comorbid conditions that go along with that usually, and so everyone is so different. And I think, very much so the same can be said for coronavirus. So you'll know from, I'm sure, just talking to anyone online or reading the newspaper, that people present in different ways with the virus. So it's important to take that into consideration. I think what I'm most usually asked in groups when the topic comes up and I said that I've had the virus, or just even on like my social media platforms, is that how did I firstly how did I get the virus? Do I know where it came from? And what were my symptoms? I think that's human nature. That's the two things that people most want to know. Start with then, how did I get the virus? I'm not entirely sure. As someone with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, care malformation, and more importantly asthma, when we're talking about something like this, a respiratory illness, I wasn't really going out a whole lot. I went to the supermarket, particularly kind of in the early days before proper lockdown, but I got my main shopping delivered. So there wasn't like a whole lot of socializing. Not that I do a whole lot of socializing on a day-to-day basis anyway, but I was like heavily pregnant, very disabled, more so than usual, and of course the virus and everything. So I wasn't actually meeting people a whole lot or going out or anything. In the run-up, in the few weeks that I had been sick and before I was diagnosed, the only people that I had seen were people dressed in basically in full PPE. So it's really a mystery. So I'd seen my GP briefly once, who wanted to check my breathing because they were only doing phone consultations at the time. Again, covered in PPE. I met with paramedics that came to the house, obviously, when my breathing was very bad, and I had a heart test done in a hospital. The appointment was made because I was pregnant, coming up to the birth, just with EDS. They just wanted to double check. So I was having an echo done in hospital, and that that appointment was kept because it was an emergency and they needed it for me to go ahead with labour and to for everything to be put in place if it needed to be put in place. So I went to that appointment, but again, with the hospital appointments being shut down only for emergencies, no one was around. The person doing the test was covered in PPE, so not really sure where I got it or where it came from. My husband wasn't sick at all. Some people can get it and don't show symptoms, so maybe, but we're not really sure. So that was just really a mystery. And anyone that's had the virus here, I'm sure in other countries, you're rang by the HSE or whatever medical authority you have in your country to try to do a contact tracing, as they call it, to try and see where you got the virus from, see who they need to follow up with, see if other people need testing. But yeah, obviously in my case that was really difficult. How do you go about doing that when you haven't been around anyone? So it was quite a mystery. Don't know, that no one knows a lot about this virus, and I think that's kind of the main thing at the end of the day. So that's really that part of the question. I have no idea. And I was so careful, and it was so annoying. I mean, we were doing things like, if we did have to take a trip into town or anywhere, we were disinfecting the car before and after with wipes, which was taking forever. We were doing all the things we were told to do, washing hands, gel. We weren't really, touching or going places. So, don't know. So then people also want to know, obviously, how was I affected personally? And again, I have to say, everyone's totally different. So with this virus, I mean, you're told, there's certain symptoms that you're just going to get. And I think, especially, I don't know about other countries, and less so now here, but definitely in the beginning, and definitely when I was tested, it was a case of, we only test people if they have this, this, and this. And one of those things was temperature. I mean, it was, if you have a high temperature, then that was going to be one of the things that one of the things that were going to push them to do a test. And I only actually got my test because I was pregnant. Realistically, I mean, even my GP who did the test was like, or who put in for the test to be done, said, I don't know if they'll even give you a test because you don't have many of the proper symptoms. The only issues I had been having really was difficulty breathing and difficulty talking, which I'm actually quite having a bit now, because this is the most I've probably talked in one setting, I think, since that. So, but for me, because I have asthma and they think that I might have mast cell activation syndrome, with all those kind of allergy related things going on, it wouldn't be unusual for me to have a long period of time where I'm having quite difficulty breathing, or my breathing just randomly stops and things like that. So I was having a lot of asthma attacks. It was very hard to control my normal inhalers. GP had tried a few things. Again, they were closed, but they were doing phone consultations, and tried a few things, like I was on steroids for a few days, steroid tablets for a few days, and they didn't really do anything. And then they were trying me on a stronger inhaler, and then at one stage my GP, as I said, was like, what, I'm going to put in for the testing just in case. And I was really, apologies again, the little queen dropped her dummy. So I really didn't think I had the virus. I had no temperature. This was kind of normal. I'm very used to not being able to breathe and being sick. So this was more so like a random normal thing for me. I was like, I'm just going through a bad phase. And my GP kind of agreed, she was like, I'm not very worried or anything, but sure, we might as well. So we put in for the testing. And then in the meantime, the maternity hospital I was going to also decided they wanted to do their own test. So I ended up having 2 tests, because the maternity hospital were like, we'll get our results quicker and then we can get you back into normal appointments and that, because obviously I was heavily pregnant and not allowed to go into the hospital. Which at the time I was like, oh, this is so ridiculous, I just have asthma. So when the 2 results came back, one came back inconclusive, which was very confusing, but they said they would treat that as a positive, because it's more likely to get an inconclusive that's positive, or like a false positive than a false negative. So they treat that as positive anyway. But then the second test came back as positive anyway. Long story short, it was this whole big thing that I'm not going to go into, this whole debacle of results and tests and everything else that went on. But long story short, obviously I had the virus, which was very surprising to me and to everyone else. Was it bad? Yeah, it was very bad. I'd be lying if it said it wasn't. Nights in particular were very bad for me. And I think with any respiratory illness, like even if you've ever had pneumonia, you will know that yourself, that nights are always the worst, or even if you have asthma, nights are the worst. So we were finding it harder and harder to really control the breathing and the asthma attacks. I was finding it very difficult to talk. At one stage I just stopped talking to my husband even, and it became very isolated, I suppose, because you forget how much communication is actually done through talk. So I was texting him, I was writing things down, but it just wasn't enough to portray a full communication, a broad spectrum of like laughter, and you're already very isolated. It's the middle of a pandemic, you're heavily pregnant, you're disabled, and your husband's your carer, so you're not leaving the house much. So it was very, very difficult, I think, that phase. But so more so the nights were very hard, and breathing, it was very hard as well for my husband to see me like that. I suppose it was very upsetting for him, and he's used to seeing me in a lot of pain, obviously. And then I think I have this thing where a lot of people with chronic illness do this, and you'll know this yourself probably if you have EDS or anything similar, that you have this great ability to forget how bad things are. So the nights would be horrendous. I'd barely sleep. I couldn't breathe at all. I would honestly, there'd be certain points where I'd think, this is it, I'm going to die. Like, I mean, you can't continue not breathing and stay alive, and I'd be just coughing and spluttering, and it would be horrendous. And then you maybe get a couple hours sleep, you'd wake up in the morning and you'd feel slightly better, and it's hard to remember. As horrible as it is, it's hard to remember the really horrible time you had during the night. A lot of people get this if you have a pain disorder, and it's your brain's own way, I think, of protecting you. So then, like, a doctor could ask you on a good day, how are you feeling? And you'll be like, oh, not too bad, blah, blah. But, like, you have to realize that someone that's in chronic pain or has any kind of chronic disability or condition, their not too bad is not the same as someone else's too bad. Like, I mean, your normal is totally different. So with that in mind, even though this wasn't a chronic condition, my normal being totally different really affected, I think, how I saw things. And then also we just couldn't get help. I mean, realistically, the help wasn't there. So before I was diagnosed with the virus, I mean, I was heavily pregnant. The paramedics were lovely, but they were like, if we bring you in, you're going to have to go into the COVID ward. That's the only respiratory place we have for you. And, you know, because I didn't know or think even that I had the virus, I was like, well, then I'm just going to get the virus. And it's not that anyone stopped me from going into hospital. They were like, look, we'd more than welcome, you know, you're more than welcome into hospital, but I will be honest with you, and there isn't anywhere to facilitate you. So that was kind of scary. I mean, there was just nowhere to go. And in fairness, my GP had tried everything in their power medication-wise. I mean, what are you supposed to do? So then kind of getting the diagnosis of those was a blessing in disguise, because at least then I could, after another few days and GP talking to the hospital and the maternity, talking to the maternity hospital who were talking to another hospital, I was able to go to an A&E in a hospital in Dublin, and then I was able to go stay in the maternity hospital for a couple of nights. At that stage I had been having my uncontrolled asthma attacks, which were actually coronavirus, I think, for about maybe like 3 weeks. It had gone on longer than the 2 weeks definitely that like you're meant to be sick for. And so like I had to isolate, like fully isolate for 2 weeks after I was diagnosed. But when I was diagnosed, it was very much the end of at least a 3, maybe a bit over period of being very unwell. So I was, by the time even that I was in hospital, I was getting a lot better. You know, and I was a lot better than when I got home from hospital. Still very weak after the 2 nights in hospital, but they gave me blood thinners just in case. We couldn't find any clots, which was great, but there were signs maybe in the blood test that there might have been something up there. And once I was given the blood thinners, a lot of the lung pain lifted. You know, obviously I said that my main thing really was just I couldn't breathe. I was having what I thought were asthma attacks. But to go a bit more into that and what it was like for me, I didn't like have, I suppose, like when you have, for me it was very dry, which a lot of people are saying about the coronavirus for them personally. So I've had pneumonia before, and I've had, because I get aspiration pneumonia and aspiration just infections quite a lot in the lungs. So when I have that, or I've had the flu really bad before, it you know, it's very wet, you know, like it's a wet cough, there's a lot of phlegm. I didn't have that with the coronavirus, so it was very, for me, it was very unusual in that regard. I've never had such a dry respiratory illness, I suppose. As I said, I found it quite difficult to talk, and a lot of people with asthma will know what I mean by that. That sometimes if you're having bad asthma attacks, it can actually bring on an attack if you're just talking. And even now I'm feeling quite raspy and it's hard to talk. You'll see as this video goes on. I think I've always had a wee bit of that, you know, just if my asthma's bad, but I'm still suffering from that now, and it's obviously been, well, you know, that was a couple of months ago that I was sick, so I'm still suffering now from that. I mean, luckily I've had x-rays and my lungs look fine, they look clear. Even when my GP checked, you know, in the early days, I only had, you know, there was only like a little bit of liquid, I suppose there's in one of the lungs. It wasn't anything too concerning. So I had quite a lot of lung pain though, for whatever reason. it kind of like a lung pain. I suppose it was in my back, but you know yourself when you have lung pain and you can just tell when you have that back pain, you're like, it's not actually my back, it's in my lung. So I had obviously the dry cough. Mostly at night though, when I was having the asthma attacks, I had the dry cough. So I was like, well, I don't really have a dry cough, so that's why I thought I didn't have the virus. No temperature whatsoever at any stage, even towards the end stages, no temperature. I lost my smell and my taste maybe for like 2 days. Again, nothing unusual for me with mast cell issues and asthma. So that was kind of really the main things, and that kind of lung pain was particularly on the right side. Then when they give me the injection in the hospital, the just in case injection for blood thinners, which they tend to do, I think, for everyone with coronavirus, that all of a sudden lifted the pain. I mean, it wasn't instant, but it was nearly as instant. And that was the first time I felt relief of any kind, so that was great. And you know, it's great, but also a bit worrying. It's like, well, did I have a clot or what was going on? But you know, my experience wasn't like overly traumatic or anything. It was, I mean, I suppose because if it was one thing after another, it was coming up towards the end of my pregnancy. It had been quite a tough pregnancy, obviously with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome and everything else, and carrying malformation, and I was just having all these symptoms that, you know, in fairness, I knew I was going to have in pregnancy. It was almost kind of laughable then that I was like, of course I've picked up this virus. Of course I have, like, you know, I just, you know, very unlucky medically. So I mean, you know, in that respect, it was, we tried to laugh slightly about it, like, you know, and I was very lucky. I was extremely lucky. Like, there was tough times, but like, you know, could have been so much worse. But especially for someone like in my condition, I honestly thought, okay, as bad as I am now, you know, I don't have the virus, because I think I'd probably be a lot worse with so much going on. So in that respect, like, I mean, I got off very lightly, I think. One thing I want to add, if you're pregnant out there, and I know you've probably heard a lot, like, if you do develop this virus, you'll probably be okay, and your baby will probably be okay. I just want to like reassure you that like that is the case a lot of the time. I know early pregnancy obviously is different, you're more at risk as far as I know, but honestly, for my experience, she hadn't a clue. Like, you know, they would do scans and everything, and she was absolutely fine. Even when I was at my worst and I wasn't able to breathe, she was doing brilliantly. Like, she didn't have a clue what was going on. So I mean, that's the main thing to, you know, I know there's a lot of pregnant people out there who are terrified at the moment, and you know, if you get it, you need to be more worried about yourself, to be honest. Like, I mean, that's kind of how the doctors dealt with it the whole time. Even before they checked, you know, did scans and checked her over, they weren't concerned at all. So that's a positive if you are pregnant and you're really worried. Oh, one other thing I suppose that I'll touch on is the testing. So all countries seem to be slightly different in this, and how they go about it. But like here in Ireland, what we do is the swab up the nose and in the throat, usually, unless that's changed now. I don't think it has, but maybe, I don't know, maybe even certain parts of the country could be doing it totally different. So I had 3 tests altogether. Again, it's a very long story, but I had 3 altogether, because I had 2 in the beginning and then I had 1 later just in case before the C-section. And how to describe the test, I don't know, it's very strange, because one of the first 2 I had, one was okay, and the second was absolutely horrendous, I have to be honest. It was like a weird, the throat's grand, it's a bit gaggy, you're like, you know, but the nose one was like an intense burning, I want to say, like a right up there, like, I mean, not even like it was painful, but I wouldn't want to say it was painful, because it was a weird sensation. It was like burning. I wasn't crying, but like just automatically water streamed down the eye. And oh yeah, and I was bleeding afterwards. My nose was bleeding after it, so that was quite bad. But yeah, so it was quite intense. But then I've heard other people saying that theirs wasn't intense. So I don't know. Like, I mean, a lot of our tests here in Ireland have been messed up as well. I'm wondering, does it have to be so intense to really get in there, or is that bad for the testing? I have no idea, obviously, but the first one I had wasn't as bad. I was like, oh, that actually was okay, I don't know what people are talking about. And then the second one I had, it was like, fuck, what are you doing to me? So yeah, so I mean, there's mixed mixed things. You'll probably hear about the tests online and how they are for certain people, and I think in the UK they're asking people to administer themselves. So I mean, obviously if you have to do that, you're not going to do it in the same way someone else is going to do it. So I assume it doesn't have to be too intense for you to get a proper real result out of. The one thing obviously is it's very quick. The testing's very quick, like, so don't be afraid. You know, I know I'm saying it's really horrible and stuff, but don't be afraid. It's like really quick, like, if you do have to get it. That's it really. I mean, if you have any questions, honestly, feel free to ask me in the comment section. Because I like putting people's mind at ease, especially like in groups online, like, you know, talking to pregnant people and stuff. Like, you know, if you have any questions, I don't mind at all. Like, I know some people are a bit like, oh, would you mind if I ask you something? And, you know, I don't care. Like, I'm not like traumatized or anything, and you can, like, please ask me anything. And like, again, I can only speak of my perspective, and if you're in another country, not in Ireland, things probably be totally different for you anyway, but feel free to ask me anything you want in the comment section. And if you haven't already, please click on that subscribe. I'll see you later.